When it comes to an audience doing something that an artist does or does not want, are they responsible for the action of their audience?
I think it depends on how they direct the audience. Because if the artist specifically is like, burn down this building, kill people, do stuff like that, if they're directing people, then I think that their actions are going to be more tied to those people's behaviors. But if it's a case like Guns N' Roses, for one of their shows, I can't remember the details.
The St. Louis show, I think.
Yeah.
Where they told the crowd to beat the fuck out of the guy filming the
Oh, that was a different, very different version. I was thinking
Guns N' Roses, of course
they did a lot of shit. I was thinking of like there was like a riot where they were like too fucked up to play or something, and there was a giant riot, and the U.S. government was trying to hold them responsible for that, and it ended up going to court, and it was ruled that they are not responsible in that case because it wasn't them telling the people, hey, you guys should riot, flip cars, burn buildings. That was specifically the fans. And so I think it's stuff like that, where if the artist is saying burn buildings, then they're probably going to be more responsible than a case where that is not happening.
And I want to take it to a more topical thing. Just as of this recording, like yesterday, Dave Grohl went on stage and said something about Taylor Swift. And a lot of people are saying, well, the reason he said that is because Taylor Swift fans went after his daughter for saying something. At what point does, let's say an artist like Taylor Swift, does she have to tell people to stop saying something about somebody else? And is she responsible for someone that big for her fan base to do something? Just not anything serious. It's, well, I mean, it depends on your person if it's that serious about internet harassment.
I think it depends on like what's happening and the scope of things. Because like, I think for most artists, like 99% of artists, that's not something that they will ever have to encounter. But I think it's when you get to the scope of somebody like a Taylor Swift, where there's hundreds of millions of fans, the potential onslaught that could be brought in, I feel like it's different than like someone of like a local band's stature. On the local level, at best, you can get a couple hundred people to do any one thing that you direct them to or whatever. But in Taylor Swift's case, like there are entire countries worth of people that she has that's a fan of her that probably would then go on to say something like that.
A couple hundred people can do a lot of damage, though.
I was about to say, it's more heinous when it is a local band, because that would be a specific amount of people doing something.
Yeah, I know the people in the audience.
Heinous or not, does an artist have a moral obligation to tell their audience to not do or to do something?
I personally think that they do. Just if you say something, your fan base will listen to you, like, and the true like fan base will, and the people who are just there to listen to your music, of course, they will do whatever they want. But let's say it's a Slipknot versus Mushroomhead situation, and like your fan base doesn't like another person's fan base. When Slipknot was like, okay, chill, like they're not the enemy anymore, that's when like it kind of like fizzled out and became less relevant because the fighting ended because the bands came to a truce because they said so.
Impulse Machine fans, we're having beef with Glass now.
Fight back.
That's all right. Fuck Glass.
It's going to be hands.
That's not
The Glass diss track drops tomorrow.
In Glass, I feel like we have an obligation that we kind of have to say something on some moral issues. But the problem is that there's a lot of moral issues in the world, and we can't say something about everything.
You have to choose which moral issues are your moral issues and which ones you find impactful right then. And people ask why you're not talking about these other things.
Yeah.
That's because everybody else has talked about other things. We have to cover these.
Because a lot of times when I'll post on the Glass social media, I'll make sure to know what my other bandmates, their positions are before I post something, because I don't want to put words in their mouth as well. And also about that is that I have to make some issues like known that our stance on. But there's too many issues in this world. And if I sit there trying to make a statement on every issue, that'll affect my mental health.
It almost affects the art at that point, too.
It does. It really does affect the art. And if I keep dwelling on every issue in this world, it's going to really put me down. And that's me personally. which is why there's not a lot of Glass political posts.
Exactly. I mean, we can kind of lump together political posts or maybe personal call-outs if there's a person who needs to be canceled for whatever reason. I'm under the stance of bands are professional organizations, and they should be concerned with their own operations first and foremost. Impulse Machine, we're a very, I hope people know, very overtly political band. We have lyrics citing leaked papers about government atrocities.
This is my first ever exposure to y'all is waterboarding at Guantanamo Bay, which is a very political thing.
We're not shy about it.
Yeah.
But also, it's like a sort of unspoken rule. We don't repost political things on Instagram because I would hope all our fans can think for themselves. And if you listen to this music and put any amount of attention to it, you should be able to guess our stances. And if it's a complex issue, then I don't want to be the one to tell you what to think. Some issues, it's very obvious.
In general, we just say facts about things, whether we do the facts in the direction that are preferred for what we think. But
And the thing about what my experience with Glass is that there's that George Carlin bit where think of the stupidest person you know.
Yeah.
And that's 50% of the voting population in the country.
Yep.
We think about a few Glass shows. We've had some very undesirable people come out to our shows and support us, and they don't get what we're talking about. They just do not get or understand what we're saying.
But then I feel it's whack to like kick them out of the show or like tell them you're not welcome here. No,
I'm not going to kick them out.
I'd encourage them come back to another show. Like listen to this as many times as you need to hear it until you finally start to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, I read Paul Stanley's autobiography where he said going on stage is like preaching to people, where we kind of are preaching our truth or whatever, our philosophy to people. And I want them to hear what we have to say.
There's no occasion where I would say on stage, if you don't support what I'm saying, get out of here. Like leave. No, because you're exactly who should be at the show if you're any kind of stance. You should never tell people I don't agree with, leave, we're not talking to you. Then who are you talking to? You're just like having a jerk circle with the people who like you.
You want to convince, you don't want to turn away. And if not convince, you want to just make somebody know what you're saying.
And especially if you have an audience that is like people who agree with like your stance, you're just getting this person more around people who are of your band's mindset, and it like starts to get the message across ideally.
Obviously, government war crimes, it's not a controversial thing to talk about in our scene, in our social circle. We're kind of on the same page about a lot of that. But if there's someone who is turned off by that kind of talk, they're the person who needs to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for Blinded by Blood, I'm literally the opposite. I repost messages that need to be reposted. Even though Blinded by Blood is not like the most public band, I feel like even having 100 followers, you have responsibility to like express your opinions and help people that you can help. And even though I know it doesn't do a lot in the long run, even helping one family in the atrocities that's happening at this time is helping real people. And I think even helping 5 people is better than helping no people. But that's not saying that like not saying anything is bad, of course. Like,
well, I feel like that's just spreading awareness and raising awareness to certain things.
I'll say there's also a very big difference between making a statement on a stance and pointing people towards resources where they can make a difference.
Yes.
Like reposting charity, like fundraising things. I think that's very important. I think that's an incredible way for bands to use their platform.
And sometimes that can give me like imposter syndrome if I do that, where it's like I feel like sometimes I'm not really making a difference. I'm just pointing to someone who is making a difference.
Well, I'd rather play a show in person and have that be where we raise funds, because an Instagram post, that's just, you're making a post online that
it kind of is virtue signaling.
In a lot of ways.
and it just feels, again, it's like saying, hey, our band stands for this, but like, are you actually in person at your show saying all of our merch sales are going to go towards this cause?
Exactly.
Like, what are you actually doing? You're going to get $5 from probably one repost online. And I mean, that's $5 that's going to go to a good place. But if you actually show up and show people, like, we have energy, like, y'all need to do something.
And this comes down to ethics versus morality. You can express a moral stance. You can say the situation in Palestine is bad on Instagram, or you can do things that actually have an effect on what's going on. And that involves, if you're doing any sort of fundraising, actually researching the fundraising and being critical about what organization is this going to? How are they having an effect? Is this actually going to help people, or is it?
Is the fundraiser to put more ads up to get more fundraisers?
Yeah, that's the reality. Is unfortunately a lot of charitable organizations, there's a lot of asterisks.
And that brings me back to what I was saying earlier. If I really thought about all these problems over and over again and really got down to the basics of all these problems, it would drive me absolutely insane. As a person, I tried this back in 2020 when all the police brutality stuff was going on and all these riots and peaceful protests. It really drove me to a point where, like, I cannot keep putting my energy towards this because it's just going to keep putting me down. And as a human being, I can't keep being down like this.
There's a reason I started making the graphic and disturbing visualizers in 2020 exactly, is because I'm like, there's too much happening right now. I need to lock myself in a closet and look at like real violence and real things and try to put this into a setting that we can actually show like what Marg was about. But yeah, another thing on the like social media aspect, from what I've noticed, I think Impulse Machine has a general stance on what the band's ideology is, which isn't the same as the stance on every member's ideology.
Well, I've heard Impulse Machine is an autocracy.
Yeah, we all have very different opinions on a lot of things, but we have, like, I think the general established ideas that the band agrees on.
Yeah.
And that's what the band's Instagram is.
Yeah, I would let the music and the presence speak for itself. But one very important part of our stance is, probably the biggest problem, is just avoidance, unawareness. It's refusing to face the problems that are happening in our society. And like the problem with virtue signaling on Instagram is A, it does nothing to help the problems that you pretend to be concerned about, and B, it fuels these corporate machines that are profiting off your attempts to pretend to care.
Yeah, it is currently Pride Month as of this recording, and you look at like Boeing putting like the rainbow logo, or like these piece of shit like fucking weapon companies equally. Like what's an example? Anyone got an example of those fucking weapon companies?
Lockheed Martin.
Yeah,
Lockheed Martin fucking putting the Rango logo. They killed so many fucking people over this past like half century. They do not deserve to fucking do that shit.
But they do that for the social like propositioning of themselves. They want to come across as a certain way because they want the public eye to favor them.
I love the CIA YouTube where they have videos of non-binary people talking about their journey with the CIA.
Oh my God.
It's like, yeah, you have those democratically elected leaders in third world countries. Well, at least you got a little pride flag.
This diverse collective can overthrow any democratically elected South American government.
You just got assassinated by a lesbian.
Oh,
That's how I want to go.
Girl boss stuff.
So like weaponizing minorities.
That is the ultimate virtue signaling.
I feel that's called proxy wars.
And I still think if people, at least in this country, would just stop using Twitter, Threads, or whatever other social media, if they'd actually talk to each other, we could get over this problem. But it's there's a lot of virtue signaling that just does nothing, and that would be solved by more people just talking to each other and relating to each other.
Oh, it does plenty. All sorts of dopamine sparks in people's brains. It keeps them satisfied.
Social media is meant to be addictive. Social media is meant to give people those little hits of dopamine so they keep coming back, which gives the company more money at the end of the day.
Kind of like the Drake and Kendrick beef.
Marilyn Monroe is the living equivalent of Gigi Allen, but let's talk about Chris Brown.
You switched it again.
Yeah.
Manson.
Fuck. Wait.
Gore, if they actually
Cut that out. Fuck.
No.
That's actually the entire episode.
I'm really gonna kill myself. Please don't do that.
Will be cut that out.
That's Patreon content.
Facts.
Patreon content, just the outtakes and just the bad takes. They're paying for a worse experience.
That's pretty much what it is.
I gotta get out all my candies because candy helps.
The extended tangents with no editing.
It does sound fun.
Thanks, Grandma.
Subscribe. $3 a month. Patreon content.
Are you promoting that to us in the room?
Yes.
Anybody else?
You'll get to hear all your own outtakes.
That's what I was about to say. I listen to every episode of this podcast.
Like,
I will probably not listen to the ones that I'm in because I cannot stand hearing me.
there's gonna be a lot of outtakes for me, I feel like, because I stumble over my words naturally, and I don't want to hear that as well.
I think you'll do good. Just keep powering through it, and you'll do fine.
I had way too much vocal fry in the episode I was in, so
Like I said, I'm getting over laryngitis, so my voice is at the peak spot where I'm perfect podcast voice.
Everybody's getting their candy segments.